Hello and welcome to Beyond the Point podcast with me, Ali Christensen. I'm curating the content I wish I had had as a dancer and creating strong, healthy, thriving dancers for the future. Not only am I your host and ex-professional dancer, but I own Align Fitness here in Huntington Beach, California, and I'm the creator of online courses for dancers such as lower body flexibility and turnout for dancers. Today on the podcast, we're talking cross-training. What does it mean? Should we be doing it? What are some of the stereotypes that are true and not true when it comes to working outside of the dance studio? These are all things that we're addressing today with the trainer guest we have. Now, this trainer is someone who was recommended to me a few years ago, and I've actually had the great pleasure and the opportunity to learn from him as I've gone through injuries, and he's assisted me to get back into performance shape, meaning how I perform my life, but also could be for the stage. He is somebody that is very, very much an elite level trainer. He has grown up in the dance world, and funny story that I actually didn't tell while we were in our interview on the podcast, but I had been working with him a couple times for my back and for general training. And at the same time, I had been working with his sister, who is a ballerina and a teacher here locally and also in a professional company. She'd been coming in for training, and I just did not connect that their last names were the same, which is crazy because they have a unique last name that I should have connected. So one day I was working with her in the studio, and I was telling her that I was going to work out after with my trainer and how wonderful he was and that where he came from. And she goes, "Wait a second, is that Brenan?" I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "That's my brother." And ever since then, we have the pleasure of having the two Ghassemiehs in our office regularly, both as clients and also as my trainer. Now, Brenan really is one of the best trainers that I've ever had the pleasure of working with and also meeting. As he works with young female athletes as part of his day-to-day, he takes young 11-year-olds into their teenage years from beginning athletics into elite level athletics, making sure that he's training them safely, teaching them healthy habits, and really working to be goal-oriented. Listen on in the podcast because this is something that he really drives home, and I couldn't agree more. I think it's so important for our dancers to be having these goals that go past what you do in this 45-minute chunk in the studio or in the gym, but keeping in mind the long-term goals and how to find trainers and people in your life in all areas that assist you to reach those long-term goals. The whole podcast is fantastic, but I have to tell you that about halfway through, it gets really good. So enjoy this episode, and we're going to jump right into it. Hey guys, today I have Brenan Ghassemieh here with me, and he is one of my favorite trainers, possibly one of the best trainers I've ever worked with, and that's why I brought him on the podcast today. Say hi, Brenan.
Hello, Brenan. I've always wanted to do that joke. I really have always wanted to, so I think throw that cheesy.
Well, there you go. You got it in there.
I'm really excited to be on the podcast. This is great, and I just love the fact that you're doing this with, it's going to help a lot of dancers and just athletes altogether. So, yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the hope. Not only dancers, but athletes and parents and just information that we all wish we had before we started the podcast, which always happens. I feel like we start talking and then I'm like, wait, save it for the podcast. We were just saying that a lot of our knowledge comes from things we wish we had known when we were younger. And it really creates the jobs, the quote jobs we have now, but they're really our passions. And I think that's what's so great about working in this field and working with people who work to make bodies better and healthier, and just the individual is it really has to be a passion job if you're going to succeed. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. I think we've both seen trainers and physicians and people that just, it's kind of just a job, and they don't do as well as the people who really are invested in their clients and the people they're working with.
Absolutely. And, it's what's funny about this profession is that we're so young in this field. I mean, the actual profession itself is what, we could stretch it out to maybe 4 or 5 decades at the most, but really the last 2 decades has it become even considered or available to have a legitimate career in here. And that's also the stigma of it, is that a lot of people from the outside looking in, and no blame to them, will see this as, oh, okay, so you're doing this now. What do you really want to do? Or what's going to be your career? That's like a common question we get, and no fault to them, because this was always thought of as like, oh, I'm going to do this while I go to school, or do this while, my real estate business climbs or something like that, or my modeling or acting, whatever stereotype you want to put on there. But what we're seeing is people that, come from a legitimate educational background, a full commitment of time wanting to go through internships, working through different populations, facilities, what have you. And it really gets driven by the fact that you wish you had somebody that was that committed and able to provide these messages, these lessons, so that, we could be more optimal athletes, but we could also understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because the best part about this job is that everybody does it. Everybody moves, everybody works out, everybody needs to exercise. Everybody has some sort of passion that involves movement in thousands of different ways. So it's really fun because it's a subject that everybody can relate to. And we happen to be, the experts in the field, but we're trying to figure it out for ourselves too. So it's really cool. And it's really cool to be at this time because we have the opportunity to really make this field very legitimate and very, streamlined in a way that we can all collaborate. But overall, it's a great opportunity. I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way you said that it's coming about, it's really changed. Even in the last 20 years, it's changed a lot. It's been around for such a short time, is one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on here, because there is definitely a certain stigma or thought when you say work with a trainer or a strength coach. Certain things pop to mind, especially for the kids and dancers. I find they think, oh, I don't want to lift weights. I don't want to be a meathead. I don't want my shoulders to get too big. That's not what I do. And I think even the parents sometimes are like, well, why would we need to do that? And that stigma of from 20 years ago, kind of when we think of like Arnold in the gym, that is absolutely what I think people think of. And they don't realize that now, especially, there's so much knowledge and education that is going into the trainers and strength coaches that are coming out of wherever they're coming from right now. Is totally different. And so that's exactly what I want to talk about today. I want you to assist us to see what happens when we get into a training session with someone like you who really knows their stuff and is able to look at long-term goals, short-term goals, what each person needs, not just I want my biceps to be bigger and I want to work out like Arnold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and it's to kind of go into that, it's, first that thought of like when you start to recommend somebody that they go see a trainer or a strength coach, and maybe they're coming from a dancing background, and you might recommend, hey, I think you need to go see a strength coach because it's something that might be outside of your exact expertise and it's going to complement what you do. And I think that's something that I constantly have to communicate to people, as well as communicate to other trainers when we're talking about how they can build value to the client. Not just to get a sale, but so that the client actually understands where somebody like myself comes into the picture. And I think what's great about being a trainer and a strength coach is that if we drop our egos and drop our own agenda overall, we're not only going to be met by less resistance to the client in a way, but we understand that we can complement whatever athletic endeavor, whatever overall agenda that the client and the athlete are going to be having. And if you go in every single interaction, and which I do, I really have to tell myself, I'm coming in here to understand where is my role and how do I complement everything else you want to do without me being involved. And I think if I go in with that mindset, I've actually been able to get a lot more buy-in in a way, because it's letting them carry on their agenda. Now they just have an extra resource that can kind of work with some of the broader spectrum movement capabilities, performance measures, things, whatever goes into it. I know that I can complement it because I'm empowering everything else that they might be doing. For example, they have 4 times a week dancing either through private training or through group class. And, maybe they see me once. I know that one time I have, like a full plate of things that I know they need. And therefore, it's really just like little stimulus of that going in, because I only get that 1 hour, but I'm really just looking to optimize what they're going to do for those 4 other times that they're in.
Right.
But that's just an example of it. And I think that's the biggest basis that I want everybody to understand, is that when you are potentially going to go see whatever you want to call it, strength coach, trainer, things like that, we'll kind of go into the semantics of that. Whenever you're going into that, understand that you're in a good spot with a good trainer if they remove their agenda and understand what you really want them to, provide you as far as service and expertise. And if they're willing to work within that and really empower everything you want to do outside rather than trying to take it away, that's where you're with a great coach and you're going to see a lot of great results. So I hope that you trust them if they have that agenda of, I'm just trying to complement what you're doing,
Yeah.
And I think that takes away some of my own pressure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important point as to why you need to work with somebody as a dancer who does at least understand a little bit of what you're going through. If you walked into a 24-hour gym and were like, hey, can I work with a personal trainer? I'm going to put the odds on they have no idea what you are asking of your body, what the aesthetic is, what you need to be able to do. So finding a coach that can understand what your ultimate goal is, not just I want to look a certain way, but what your performance goal is a huge part of finding the right trainer or coach for you.
Absolutely.
You're doing that. You were talking about, you said strength coach and trainers. Can you tell us a little bit about what makes a strength coach different from a trainer?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny when you asked me this a couple of days ago, it really got my mind running on, one thing. And I think every strength coach or trainer that listens to this understand that this is just my classification, because I think that the semantics of it really gets people a little bit more passionate than they need to be, as opposed to what is your priority and how are you serving your client base. Mm-hmm. So this is how I've kind of like been able to classify certain things. When I think of a strength coach, if somebody identifies themselves like, I'm a strength coach, they may see it as, they are strictly aiming for performance-based measures. So it might not be body recomposition as much as it might be, I need you to gain muscle so that you have, X amount of strength for your sport. Strength coach may identify themselves because they work in a facility that only sees teams, sees smaller groups, and really only wants to work with developing actual strength and movement qualities. Whereas maybe a trainer, they might identify themselves as a trainer because I kind of picture this in a more commercial style gym, one that has, general population athletes kind of flowing in and out. And therefore the trainer might see themselves as being a little bit more broader spectrum on who they see, why they're seeing them, how often they're seeing them, and everything of that sort. And the trainer, I'd say like a trainer tends to pride themselves on wearing a lot of hats. Mm-hmm. You hear a lot of the cliche of, oh, the trainer is also the therapist and things like that. And, while we don't consider ourselves therapists, even with a master's degree in sports psychology, that still doesn't dictate me as a therapist. But trainers might see themselves as that because maybe the performance isn't as much of a diehard priority, whereas some of the social sides of things, some of the behavior sides of things might take precedent in their sessions. So, when I think about that, my clients will call me a trainer, and I also have clients that call me their strength coach. Mm-hmm. I have clients that call me their performance coach. So I feel like wherever my clients are calling me, I see it as like, this is just the semantics that they choose to call me in. But when I think about my own identity, I need to just understand, what am I trying to do, and how do I prioritize this in a day? So my identity is a strength coach. My values are, I want to increase performance through the athletic population of all sorts and ages. And how I prioritize this is I work in an athletic development facility where I see small teams of youth athletes and does it. So kind of go through that step, and that creates a storyline. And we all kind of have our own like storyline. I even call myself more of a health and performance coach, mm-hmm. because I work with performance athletes who they don't come to me saying I need to decrease my body fat. Like maybe that's a secondary goal, but it's increasing or decreasing their 40-yard dash time. And therefore, like I'm more of wearing the hat in performance coach, whereas my other clients that are in their 60s and they want to improve their blood pressure and their overall blood profile, I am their health coach, full on, but there's still performance measures in that. So, you know, I think the overall title and things pales in comparison into understanding how you came to that. And I ask a lot of people in my field that I would say, oh, they're a strength conditioning coach. But then I ask them and they have like their own made up title of it. I think that's wonderful. You know, I think because if you're able to come through that based off of what you're doing in your day, that's awesome.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. So. But when you just said they're a strength and conditioning coach, there is a certification that would give you CSCS. Is that what it is?
Yes, absolutely. And that's actually a wonderful question too, because how you can classify it through your education is big. So the CSCS is one, the CFSC, which is a certified functional strength coach. Those are probably your two biggest ones. Mm-hmm. But even when you look at Exos, they have two different certifications that are performance specialists, but then also personal training and training specialists. So I feel as though with whatever educational certification you choose to get as your main foundational one that you're going to be legal to be working in your scope, that will also kind of tell you what road you're going to go down. But I know a lot of coaches here that are personal trainers through and through, but they also have their CSCS as their main one. So just know that if you're listening to this and you're considering getting any sort of certification, understand what kind of subject that's going to come into play. And don't be afraid to get kind of all of them, you know, because the more like wide range that you get in these educational certifications, you're going to be able to work with more clients and be able to do more in that session. So,
And, you know, I'm a huge advocate that just because you have certain letters behind your name doesn't mean that you have an ability to work with certain clientele or even people. But so what you started out with is absolutely right. But I know I get a lot of questions, people asking, how did you do what you do? Where were your steps? How did you end up here? What certifications do you have and all that kind of stuff? So I think it's really nice to understand that there is a difference, but I do love the way you just said it is about the client. It is about the goals, and you want to find a trainer or whatever you call them that can look at the big picture, and you start to see results getting you there. I've worked with quite a few different trainers, and there's been some that it feels really all over the place. Each session is different, and there's no continuity going through each progression. And then when I started working with you, because Brenan is my coach, it was a totally different story. From time to time, I was like, oh, this built on top of this. We see this and this. And that's something that I think me as a dance teacher, as a dancer, that's important to me because that is kind of the dance world. And I brought that into my training just because of maybe dance. But to see that a trainer who doesn't work with dancers or doesn't have that background in dance can do that, it was like, oh, this is what humans need. We need that progression on top of each other. So it's a really important part, I think, of finding the right person to work with.
Yeah, no, and I love that you said that. And, you know, I actually feel as though the one innate thing that I can say came from just my upbringing through dance and how it's expressed now is, you know, there's beauty in the basics and there's beauty in repetition in a way. And dancers know that more than arguably any other athlete because you're constantly repeating certain skills. And when you think about choreography of an entire dance, an entire number going through, I mean, it doesn't just say, okay, I'm going to demonstrate the entire number and I'm going to expect you to replace it. What is it really like? It's an 8 count. You're going to learn this 8 count and the movements in it. We're going to rehearse this thing. We're going to master this thing. Okay, next 8 count. Okay, now we're going to add on to it, right? So I think when, you know, especially with working with you and Seb, That was wonderful because not everybody appreciates that type of approach where we're seeing a lot more people that, oh, they want to change it up. They want to confuse their muscles, whatever term you want to use. And there's a lot of beauty in movement variability. But when you base it off of something that you've done before in a previous week or in a previous session, and you use that as your catapult to add in complexity or just making it tougher in a way for the following week, that's the definition of progressive overload. That doesn't just mean, all right, let's just keep adding more weight. You keep doing the same movement. Sometimes you got to change the movement a little bit, but there's still that relationship between what you may have did the week before that was, rather basic, rather easy. Okay, let's make it a little bit tougher, but that doesn't mean I'm just going to like, okay, that session was really easy. I'm just going to change up the entire thing. That I just feel like that ruins a kind of flow that you're trying to look for in a session. I like things feeling fluid, like my clients having some certainty in what they can expect for that day, without like, the monotony of, I know exactly what I'm going to do.
Right.
I want to find that delicate balance.
Right. Well, and if we're tying it back to dance, then that would be like, you got to be able to do a tendu before you can do a Ghassemmieh, right, dancers? You wouldn't expect someone to be able to do a great Ghassemmieh if they couldn't do the tendu first. And that's the same in your conditioning training outside of the studio. It might seem simple, but the skill of you perfecting a squat or a lunge is the same as you perfecting your tendu before you do a Ghassemmieh. So it's really important. And I see a lot of stuff on social media, being on Instagram a bit, that it's all about these crazy new inventions and toys and things. Yeah. And it's everyone wants to do the cool looking thing. And then my experience is they come in and then they can't do a plank. They can hold a plank. Yeah. They can hold a plank position for 2 minutes, but can they really do it with strength and with precision? No. And then they want to do these crazy different variabilities in there. And it's like, ooh, nope, we got to go back to the basics. So that's the building blocks that we need to start on. And I think that if you have the strong base, like in a plank, like in a tendu, you're then going to be able to add in those crazy movements that we're seeing on Instagram, but you can't do it before you have the basics.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what's funny about that, and I love the examples that you use there. I haven't done a tendu I don't even think I've ever done a tendu.
Yeah.
So I need to look into what that is.
Let's clarify, guys. So you're talking right now to a Nutcracker whiz. How many Nutcrackers did you do?
I think I did like 5 or 6.
Okay, so
I had to have done at least that.
Brennan's sister is a professional ballerina. And like any good ballet family, you got dragged into Nutcracker.
Yeah. It was funny. And I didn't just get dragged into Nutcracker. Anybody in Southern California that knows Showstoppers and has been trapped in the Disneyland hotel for 3 days at a time.
Yeah.
Oh, I was a big competitor in Showstoppers.
Oh.
I was all over the place, and I was a dancer through and through for about 5 to 6 years as my upbringing. And it, I like how you said it. It's like you kind of got dragged into it, where I didn't know anything else. My sister was going to dance from like 3 on. So by the time I can remember, I've always been in a dance studio. So at some point, even my brother and I, we decided, well, we're hyper. We're running around the studio constantly with nothing to do, just trying to play with anything. If I find a pine cone outside, I'm going to play with it. Suddenly I realized, there's an entire opportunity of movement in here. And I just did it. I'm sure my mom had a little bit of a coaxing to do that, to get through the social construct of this. But yeah, I'm a Nutcracker vet.
Yes.
Fritz, you can't mess with me. I might have been the best Fritz of all time.
Yeah. I went to the Nutcracker with Brenan last year. We sat next to each other and he was like, This is snow. This is the part. It gets a little tired here. But this is this part. This is this part. And I was like, dude, you know your Nutcracker. It is ingrained in your brain. So you have definitely done a tendu in your life. You just don't even remember it.
I don't even remember it. Yeah, like the names of these things, somebody will bring it up. And I think in the past, in our sessions, you'll bring up And him and I was like, I got to look that up.
Yeah.
I remember that for some reason. I just don't remember which position.
Yeah, but then as soon as I show you, you're like, oh yeah, you mean like this? And I'm like, dang it, his arabesque is better than mine.
Oh, man. And actually on that note, my nephew, my sister's son, I remember as like he was less than a year and he started like kind of walking around. And my sister one day was like, arabesque, Vinny. And, the little kid he started doing an arabesque.
Yeah, just throws his head back, lifts his leg.
Yeah. And still to this day, when he runs, he kind of has like a little quick arabesque. Like it's like,
oh, that's so cute.
Yeah. It's adorable. So he might be the next top Fritz.
Yeah, he might. I have a feeling.
Look at that.
I have a feeling.
Oh, yeah.
Also, last Nutcracker, I will always remember this because we were all sitting, the whole Ghassemmieh family and me, and her little son, who's 5 now. Is that how old he is? We're at the end and they're like applauding and it's the coda and he goes running up to the bottom of the stage and puts his chin on the bottom of the stage. I was like, I'm going to cry. This is so cute. So just all of you are born and raised in the ballet world because of your sister. And that's amazing because now we all get to pull your knowledge because of that.
Oh, yeah. And I love that moment. I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, it just shows the passion that you have. And I love seeing the fact that my 5-year-old at that time, now 6-year-old nephew has such a deep appreciation for the world of dance to the point where he had to sprint up and say hi to his mom and, father-in-law all at the same time. That was an amazing moment. I still think about that. And it's really important, to have that type of appreciation. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
It was so sad.
Yeah.
Or so cute.
It was like made you want to cry because you're so happy about it.
Yeah. I think that's why I said sad. Like,
you had those tears coming down.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Awesome.
And that's what dance does for us. When you, especially from being in it as a kid, it just creates such drive and passion and commitment to movement. And I want to see that then translated into taking care of themselves outside of the studio. That's one of my passions, having been injured and making that my ending mark there. It was like, oh crap. Like I have so much love and appreciation and passion for this art and the drive it takes in my body can't keep up. And there would have been ways, I firmly believe that if I had known you, if I had known other people, other ways of working as a younger student, I don't think I would have had that situation. But then I wouldn't be here being able to talk with you and make hopefully some changes in the world now. So it all works out. But we can all be little 5-year-old running up to the stage to watch it. That would be great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so good. Please go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish. Tell me what you're going to say.
Well, no, I just, I think that what we both brought up as far as like our desire to, I wish we could have like known this stuff and all that. I also think I probably, if I didn't tear both my ACLs, both my shoulders, had 6 reconstructive surgeries, I don't think I would have been as great of a strength coach now as I feel like I am, like as far as a service. And it gives you that type of empathy, relativeness, and compassion because you've actually experienced it. So therefore you can like, I understand you, but we got work to do because there is always a solution to this. If we didn't have these types of challenges and failures in the past, we probably wouldn't be as good of coaches.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing goes for like being a teacher. Maybe you had that teacher in the past that just didn't support you and you decided, I'm going to be better than that. I'm going to have a better impact on the world. And I think that's why we are so dedicated to this. And, if things would have been perfect and I never would have gotten injured and you wouldn't have had these injuries and struggles as well, we probably would be a little less compassionate in our work, and therefore the work itself is going to like sap overall. So
yeah,
I think we can definitely identify each other with that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true for sure. So Brenan, you work with a lot of girls, with a lot of young athletes.
Yes.
What are some of the challenges that you see working with young females? Because although they are not typically dancers, I do think the body changes, the way that young girls tend to move, and the things that they need to do well for jumping, agility, speed, those are all the same as dance. We just don't quite tie them together sometimes. So what are some of the challenges that you work with your kids when you're trying to create some of that stuff?
I mean, this is a wonderful subject and something that I've become extremely aware of, now more than ever after having some time with these girls. And we're referring to having a basketball team that now is extremely high level, whereas 2 years ago when I started, they were all 11, even as young as 9 years old. And, they're basketball players, but they're still girls. And basketball and dance, just like you said, has very similar factors of what you need to be good at, simply put, and be really strong and proficient at in order to climb up in your sport, or else you're going to find yourself kind of stagnant right here. And I think some of the challenges that I first ran into is what have they been told before this? And due to the fact that I have too many of these girls, I don't have like one-on-one attention where I can really understand like what maybe their parents presented to them or their friends are presenting to them. I'm kind of going on the basis of the entire team. And I think that was a challenge because, being a male also, and just being very front about this, the last thing I wanted to do is to have this relationship build where wherever these girls go and they go into their strength conditioning or their training or things like that into their sport later on, the last thing I wanted was for them to have the memory of somebody like myself pushing them in a way that made them feel intimidated or in a way that made them feel self-conscious about what they're doing. And I also didn't want to create this cloud of negativity and intensity that I think the stigma of what we do as strength coaches and trainers tend to happen, right? Like we think of that cliche of like the whistle and like telling you what to do. And what I'll say to all the parents that are listening to this specifically, that is not true. That is not nearly as apparent as maybe it used to be 10 years ago. 10 years ago isn't my business. All I know is that what I see now with trainers, strength coaches, there is a deep ingrained compassion that people really want to express. You can get a guy that's like 300 pounds, massive, but I see him being sweet as can be to a 65-year-old grandmother. So with that being said, I think that was a big challenge that I needed to communicate in a way that I'm not trying to sell them on anything. I'm not trying to sell them on the fact that they need strength training in order to do this. I'm simply going about this as if it was just simply part of their practice, simply part of their development overall. And, the coach and my client happens to be one of the most well-known athletes of all time, and also one of the most well-known in how he used to train in order to be at the top of his sport. And I think as he and I were discussing starting to get his girls into strength training, that was something I wanted to communicate to him, that I'm not here to whip them into shape. Right. I'm not here to, teach them discipline. I'm here to be consistent. I'm here to support them. And I'm also here simply to give them some sort of consistent mechanical stress under the body so that they can handle the increasing stress that they're going to find in their sport. So I think that was one big challenge that I needed to start off with. I needed them to like me.
Yeah.
Point blank. I needed them to trust me. I needed them to feel comfortable around me, that I wasn't going to be some sort of intimidating jock or whatever they wanted to maybe initially picture me as. I'm a naturally sweet guy. I'm a naturally nice guy. So it wasn't very hard for me to be able to do that.
Are.
But I think, I think the sister in me, or my sister really ingrained that in me. But, presenting this with the highest amount of respect for themselves, never raising my voice, being very diligent about, I'm giving you corrections to make this better, not because I think that you're doing this wrong or, it like purposely bad or anything like that. So that was a big challenge. But then also the second biggest challenge was the social construct that I know that they're going to increasingly understand. These girls went, as I mentioned, they were anywhere from 9 to 11. And now I'm talking to 14 to 11 year olds. So they're older, they're getting more mature. Physically, they're growing a lot. So with the female body specifically, as they grow, you start to see, the pelvis goes out a little bit wider, right? We understand that that's to prepare for the body being ready for childbirth at some point, because they're maturing into women. And, just from a physical standpoint, the knees tend to go in a little bit more. So when we look at the lower body, the prevalence of ACL injuries is skyrocketed much higher, more than any other population in that type of age bracket that I'm working with. So the social construct of, I don't want to get bulky, I don't want to train in order to gain all this muscle, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I've actually heard women tell me, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. So I don't want to be a bodybuilder either.
Yeah.
So
I don't want you to be a bodybuilder.
Great.
We're going to work out great.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that sounds great. I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder, and I'm in my mid-20s as a guy. So most guys in their mid-20s might want to be bodybuilders. I don't. So that's fine. And I think knocking that stigma down, that I'm not trying to make you a bodybuilder. I'm actually trying to make you healthier and stronger so that you can handle the stresses of your sport. That's a big thing. So the physical side of things, and ensuring that there is a why behind everything. And you hear that a lot with coaches, like, there should be a why with everything. I'm making sure to tie things together. So I may not be explaining exactly why this specific exercise is in here, but what I find is as really important as the entire hour, maybe the entire session, or even maybe just a circuit, I'm going to explain a little bit of the relationship between that. So for instance, they're doing, I call it puddle jumps. It's a side, it's a lateral bound over. Also, make it less threatening when you're working with young athletes. Don't make, okay, we're going to do a non-counter movement lateral bound. Yeah, they don't care about that stuff. I tell them, okay, you got a big puddle in you or next to you. You need to jump over that puddle, but you got to land on one foot. Yeah, right. So you make it less threatening. You make it kind of fun. You give them some sort of visual imagination. And like, maybe I do that, and then a single leg stability exercise as their recovery. So then now I have their circuit. How do I explain this so that they're not thinking, well, my legs are going to get really bulky from this? I just tell them, hey, when you land from your jump and you know how somebody gets pushed and rolls onto your ankle, I want to make sure you can roll with it, or at least fight against it. You know? And that's all the rationale I really need to explain, rather than, you're doing a push-up because I want you to grow your shoulder muscle. I don't even communicate that with, my clients that actually want to gain muscle. I tell them, hey, you're doing a push-up because of X amount of reasons. And you just kind of you got to tie in some relational things that important to them. So when you understand the population that is in front of you and why they're coming to see you, and again, going with the agenda to complement everything, suddenly the way you express and communicate what you're giving them isn't going to be misconstrued and tied around into some of these worries that are very real worries. These are social constructs that women go through. They don't want to become bulky. They don't want to be manly looking people. But if it was that easy, then every man you see in the gym is going to be bulky and stuff. But you also see a lot of men constantly lifting weights for years and years, and they don't get to a certain level where you can call them bulky. So it's a lot easier to communicate this at an early age. And that's why I'm extremely grateful to have worked with a group of 10, now 11 girls at such an early age, because this isn't the subject anymore. This isn't something that they tell me, oh, I don't want to get big arms and stuff. So that's I think amazing. Starting early is a big thing. It's a big challenge to get them in. But if you're a parent listening to this and your kid is getting to that 10-year-old stage, understand that there is a lot of options of strength training that are very healthy and very appropriate for your kid. And the earlier you get them in, not only do you give them experience to understand what they're doing when they're out on their own, but you're also going to knock down some of those, misconceptions that they're having within their development.
Yeah. So one of the, as I know but one of the most common things I hear when I say, I work in cross training for dancers, I'm a trainer for dancers, I do strength with dancers, is, oh, I don't want to get bulky quads or big arms, or I can't lift weights. And what would you say to a parent or a dancer that's worried about that? I mean, you kind of said it is kind of, I have a friend who works out every day, but like 30 minutes a day. No, nothing crazy. Not trying to be Arnold, as we were saying. But he always says, it's offensive to me that you think you can bulk up so much because I'm doing all this work I'm doing every day and I'm not getting bulky. And I'm like, yeah, I get that now, because when I was young, I am not a toothpick. I have muscly genetics on both sides of my parents. And it was always a constant battle. I was always being told that my quads needed to slim down. So I was so afraid to, quote, use my quads. And I worked to the detriment of my dancing because I was trying to not use my quads, which I now know is impossible. You have to use your quad and your hip flexor to lift your leg above 90 degrees. So when you hear like your sister, who I know in the past has said, well, I don't want to get bulky, what would you say to her? Or if you could lovingly coach her, what would that advice look like?
Yeah, it's a wonderful subject and, a cliche overall. And, first thing, when I'm met with that, I am going to approach it as like, I understand your concerns, and I'm going to place it on wherever their concern is given their life. For a dancer, I mean, I remember seeing one of my sister's dance teachers come up to my sister, pinch her arm, and say, "What is this?" as she jiggled it, and then walked away. And I was stunned. I was 10 years old. I'm looking at my 12-year-old sister, and I'm like, "What was that?" Like, nobody's ever come up and done that to me. And my sister was really hurt and stuff like that. So, I'm going to go ahead and be the devil's advocate here. Dance teachers, if you're listening to this, don't ever do that again. Yeah. Please. Right. Okay. You are creating something that is a lot more dangerous of a mindset than going past dance. You might do this to a student. Maybe you see them for another 6 months. Maybe they're great dancers for years. Who knows? But those experiences on body image and self-efficacy are going to be dramatically affected by examples like that. So please do not do that. You're not going to win off this anyways. You're not going to get the outcome you want. So had to be there. I had to say that because that scarred me. For life. I can remember that as a 10-year-old. That didn't even happen to me, but it's never going to leave my brain. Yeah. So now that like pressing the dance teacher is over, I definitely want to be more compassionate and not just like tell them like, "Oh, you're silly. That's stupid." I do want to like acknowledge the fact that like I understand where you're coming from, and I do understand how fitness and weight training has been marketed to us to express like bulky men and things like that. But then I do go into explaining a little bit more about what definition of strength is, as opposed to bodybuilding or hypertrophy training in a way, right? Those two can be married to each other. Those two complement each other very well, but those two are not the same thing. Yeah. Right. Because strength training does in no way automatically means you're going to gain muscle, right? Strength training is the ability to control opposing forces and express force in some way, right? So when I paint that picture and let them and really give them that type of definition of strength, they'll understand that strength does not mean getting a pump. Strength can mean controlling movement or being able to express that force into the ground. And then when I start to overlay that with, okay, you're a dancer. So when you start doing your jumps and you're on stage, do you really want to like be that loud, or do you want to absorb into the ground, not feel your joints too, but also absorb into the ground, which is what you want to be as graceful as you want, right? Yeah. But then again, you absorb into the ground, you probably have another jump right away. So you have to absorb, press. Yeah. We use the joke constantly, jump like Vitor, right? Yeah. Why do we use jump like Vitor?
What's Vitor's last name?
Vitor Luis.
Luis. Okay, so he is the principal or ex-principal of San Francisco Ballet. And my brother-in-law. And his brother-in-law. See, ballet is in his blood. It's like even married into the family. So last year we were at Nutcracker, and my boyfriend, who knows nothing about dance, came with us. And He's just a true guy who doesn't know anything about dance. And we watched Vitor in the Sugar Plum Cavalier thing. And he's watching him sail across the stage and do these triple tours in the air and land on a dime, no noise. And he's like starting to understand the kids sound louder. They're a little less graceful than the principals. And so from a very outside perspective, he's like, oh my gosh, look what Vitor can do.
Beautiful.
And at the same time, we both had been training with Brenan, and we had been actually working on essentially a tour in the air, but then landing quietly in parallel like you're ready to sprint. So we get home, and my boyfriend says, God, did you see how Vitor did that tour thing? And he doesn't have the words for it. And I'm like, yeah, it's super hard. And he goes, well, I'm going to try it. So I have a video of him trying to do a tour like Vitor, and he keeps taking off in parallel, landing like an athlete, landing like we've been working with Brenan. So he keeps saying, or I keep saying, not like Brenan, like Vitor, jump like Vitor. So it's become the like long running joke that we want to be like Vitor, not like Brenan, although to be Brenan would be perfect. But it was this appreciation of what Vitor could do versus what we were doing with Brenan as our cross training. It was like blowing his mind. So that's still a long running joke with us.
It was like amazing to see how amazed somebody like Sebastian, who's an expert in movement, how amazed he was, because you and I, we were used to that.
Yeah.
Like, that wasn't new and novel, but it was something that we deeply appreciate. But then seeing how amazed Seb was, and that video, if you can find a way to post that, don't ask Sebastian for
just do
approval.
it.
still one of the funniest videos I've ever seen. But he looked very athletic doing it. And actually, on that note, Sebastian came from a history of he was scared to deadlift.
Yeah.
But only a few months before that, we did strength training over time, and it wasn't like I was treating him like he was fragile. I'm talking to a rehab specialist here.
Right, and he grew up doing baseball, and he's very athletic, but he also hurt his back a couple years ago and worked with you. When I hurt my back 2 years ago, you worked with me. It got both of us back into correct movement patterns, which I've talked about on this podcast many times, that once you're injured, it's this weird phenomena that you think you're doing it correctly and you're not. And you really need somebody who understands what should be happening to tell you, like, oh, move over to the right a little bit, try this, try that. And that, for me, that's where Brenan came in and has really assisted me to get over that hump of going from injury back to performance.
Absolutely. And, I think on one other note that, dance parents, you're listening to this, athletes, you're listening to this right now. What strength training has always meant to me has been this type of rhythmic movement with your muscles all coordinating together, right? So you see something like jumping like Vitor, and he had rhythm, he had grace, he had laxity and fluidity in that movement, whereas opposed to if you're not strong, there isn't rhythm in your movement. There's like a choppiness, there's a lag behind it, there's heaviness, like it sounds clunky.
Yeah, it's like throwing a sandbag on the floor. It doesn't bound back up.
Yeah. And also from a health standpoint, and I demonstrate this all the time for my girls, because we work on landing a lot more than we work on jumping, because they're in that age group. I tell them, I need you all to land so gracefully that when I watch you play, I don't want to cringe at the thought of like you landing from a layup and somebody gets under you, right? And they're working really hard at this, but I really demonstrate, like sometimes I jump up and I land really stiff, like my legs are stiff. And I ask them, where do you think I felt that? And I point to my ankle, knee, hip, lower back, all the way up to my spine, up to my neck, because I feel a jolt go through those bony segments, right? But once I absorb the ground, I ask them, what do you think I felt there? And I feel all muscle system. I feel like everything just kind of pulling and tensing in the right sense, almost as if I'm like a slingshot. Right? It feels great. It feels really nice and natural. I don't think people can do that at a high level, especially ballerinas, without strength training. Yeah. I think it's just going to keep hurting their joints, and it's not something you got to be prideful on. Yeah. If you're a dancer listening to this and you're thinking to yourself like, oh, my back's always hurting. I'm working so, hey, you're not doing a great job right now. You gotta like take care of yourself a little bit more, okay? Because I want you dancing more. I want you not regretting your dance and being scared of it. So you got to learn how to strengthen your body to handle what you're going to put yourself through.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we are so used to that pain level always being there. And then on top of that, dancers work in a very specific way, always externally rotated. And the bottom line, no offense to dance teachers, because this is not their area, they do not train you to have this agility with your body. They don't train you to absorb the floor. I know you're thinking, oh, what my teacher always says, soft landing, plie, get my heels down to the floor. There are certain cues that they have visually realized are important for a jump, but they're not training you to absorb the floor. They're not training you to be able to be agile and jump and move like you're talking about. That happens outside of the studio with a different specialist. So if you think you only need to train in ballet to be a ballerina, we are past that time. Maybe that was true 100 years ago. And I know there's still some teachers who kind of think that. But if you look at the Royal Ballet right now, they are training all of their dancers in strength and conditioning. There's this amazing video of like these kids deadlifting, these prima ballerinas, deadlifting, throwing weights, doing sandbags. It's like, yes, finally, they see that you cannot be the best ballerina by only doing ballet in the studio with your body working a certain way. If you had, Brenan, someone who came into you, or these girls, if they were only training one type of movement over and over and over, you would create a variety of movement because you can't just work one way. This is what I see with dancers. They work one way for 20 years and then they wonder why they get injured. And, they're like, wait, parallel. We don't do parallel when we're in the studio. I know, but by creating that support structure in parallel, internally rotating, jumping side to side, not like a ballerina, you're going to excel and create better rotation, better landings, better body, all these kind of things that would happen will not happen if you only train inside of the ballet studio.
That's a wonderful point. That's an absolutely wonderful point. And, that goes back into my main agenda piece is complementing. Like if we understand that you are exploiting a certain movement path a lot, great. I'm not going to take that away from you because I know that's your bread and butter. That's your performance. That's what is driving your passion. Cool. Let me make that better. Let me make sure that doesn't get overused to the point of injury. Let me strengthen the other aspects around it. And who knows, you can actually improve on that skill. You can have more power, stability, mobility within that type of scope, whatever it is. And like that's what people that are still kind of ambivalent to it need to just understand is that, when you train it and you break apart these needs that the body has, given your sport, given your skill, whatever you want to exploit your body to do, then you got to understand that going into a strength training session doesn't take that away. It actually enhances it. Yes. And to see Royal Ballet go through this strength and conditioning, I also would love to see that video because I guarantee you that video is not going to be a bunch of grunting and sweating and slapping around and stuff like that.
No.
I was a collegiate football player. Maybe in that realm, there is a lot of grunting and sweating. And that's fine because the sport has a lot of grunting and sweating. I find strength training to be very beautiful, very elegant. Even something as simple as a bench press, if you look at it from a different perspective than just thinking, oh, that's a grunt movement, I still find there to be a lot of beauty in the ability to do that movement. And seeing Royal Ballet and thinking about those ballerinas doing a deadlift, that to me is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like they can do that with some grace and elegance while still being strong. Like there is beauty in being strong. As a woman, as a man, any way you want to be beautiful, like there is a lot of beauty in having strength. Your confidence is going to be up. Also, your nervous system, the more powerful and strong you get, and if you do it in a controlled setting, like strength training, it's all over the place too, like basketball, ballet, things like that. But if you express that and develop that, your nervous system is firing on all cylinders. Your focus, your reactivity, your ability to have motor control and being safe and being really conscious of your awareness and body awareness, all those increase, and again, this is not even going into now hypertrophy training and endurance training and all that. That's not even what we're talking about. We're just talking about strength and power at this point. And you're just getting smarter and more like confident in your movement because it's such a big neurological component to being strong and stressing your body to be stronger. And so, yeah, I mean, I really wholeheartedly believe that if you're a ballerina and you want to climb up to that level, I mean, you and I have a similar client, right? My sister.
Yep.
When I first got back here to California, and I brought my sister into the gym one day because she had so many injuries that she actually had to take a small break. And my sister's always had amazing pain tolerance, just like every ballerina I've ever met. They have amazing pain tolerances because their passion drives them to keep pushing through it. And I finally told her, hey, you need to come in and try strength training. Just try strength training for me. This girl was really struggling to get in and trust me all the way. But she knew I'm her brother and I grew up in this realm. So she knows what I'm not going to want her to do. I don't want her to gain and be bulky and all that stuff. So she trusted me because we knew each other so well. I got to say, I mean, within 3 weeks, it was such a huge difference in what she was able to do and how healthy she felt and everything. She felt strong. She felt very confident. And since then, I mean, she does weight training with Sebastian. She does gyrotonics, which is an incredibly tough form of Pilates going through that she does with you, as well as cross training, and you take her through weight training as well. And I gotta say, with my sister, she's definitely not bulky. You and I can agree with that.
She's a toothpick.
She's a little toothpick, but she is strong as can be. And she just trusted the process. She trusted people that understood that we're not trying to change who she is and what she wants to do. We're here to optimize that.
Yep.
And she's probably the best example of what this whole social construct and the misconception really is. I mean, she's seen amazing results and she's in her 30s now.
I was just going to say that she's a better ballerina in her 30s than she was at what I think she would consider her prime in her, early 20s or whatever that would be. She is
at ABT.
Yeah, exactly. She is a stronger, more precise, elegant, graceful dancer. And I saw it change in, I'm sure there was a big change from the time you're talking about, but from the time I started working with her, where we really brought in concentration from all sides. We did nutrition, we did sleep, we did lifting, we did gyrotonic, and we pushed it all together, including what she's doing with you. In 2 months, from October to Nutcracker last year, she said that people who've seen her dance her entire life were like, what are you doing? You look the best I've ever seen, including the directors of the companies, going on. So I just think that is, even though she's been doing this, it's such a testament to being consistent, adding in the stuff that complements what you're doing, not takes away from it. And then I guess trusting the people in your life, trusting you, trusting me, that kind of stuff. But it was a big difference, a huge difference.
I'm so glad you brought up that last year. I mean, I've been her biggest fan since I was a boy.
I know you have.
I've watched this woman dance for thousands and thousands of hours. And I got to agree with you, last year, I don't think I've ever seen her get through a Nutcracker without some sort of more limiting injury that really held her back from performing really well. I remember in past years, there were times where it was a performance where she kind of just was flat. She still got it done. She still was elegant, but she just looked flat and really in pain. And almost like the emotional side of things started to really decline for her because she was wondering, like, why am I putting myself through this? And what you two did, especially you last year, and the buy-in and trust that she had for that, I think she knew that something was missing and she got that. And last year, I mean, she was vibrant. I saw her at Christmas and she was glowing, where usually Christmas for us is a day of rest.
It's Nutcracker season. God, it's exhausting.
Yeah. So she doesn't want to do anything. So she had a lot more confidence in herself. She wasn't limping around and crying and things like that because I knew she was in pain. She wasn't in pain nearly as much. And you worked incredible stuff with her. And the fact that other people got to see it, it let me know I wasn't just being biased towards my sister, which I am. So
yeah, well, you should be. But yes, I heard that over and over. And, she expressed that to me, that she's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the compliments I'm getting from people who've seen me dance for years and years and years. So that is just the perfect testimony. And honestly, that's the perfect way to end our time today. So is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know about you, or what you want for them as they strength train and dive into this world a little bit?
I think it just kind of like recaps or reflects of some of the things that we've been talking about. Understand that when you're like the person that you trust, if they start to bring in other experts, trust them first and be aware that it's about you. It's about what your needs are, what your wants are, and what this is going to mean for them. Because I don't go in thinking that anybody wants to be a professional strength gainer, or however you want to put it, professional exerciser, right? I want them to use whatever we can do here and be better at your true desires, your true passions that are outside of the gym. So I hope that parents that are listening to this, kids that are curious about this, I want you to try it, because at some point you're going to have to do this on your own, or just do this for the health of your life. Now that you have this reasoning and rationale to perform better, there's no better time to get used to this. There's no better time to get better at this. And just understand that people that are in my profession, in your profession, any of these, we're all here to work together to benefit you. So when you have multiple people in your corner, they might all have small amounts of agendas, but in the end, we're all just trying to make the athlete, make the client better in their goals. And trust them, speak to them, give them feedback, give them communication, because the more you communicate with somebody like myself and you, the more that we can provide the service that's really important to you, and the more that we can complement all of your desires and all the goals that you want to achieve. So, all I can say is just, continue to trust us, continue to be curious and experiment with these things. There's nothing wrong with straying away from your main bread and butter movements and skills and sports and things in order to get a little bit more variability and a little bit more of completing the picture overall. That's including being multiple sport and things of that nature. But, when it comes to the importance of strength training for ballerinas, I got to say, there's a lot of testaments and a lot of examples that we brought up that continuously speak to the fact that there are misconceptions that are fair, but they are misconceptions. Yeah. So I appreciate anybody who's listening to this, and Ali will obviously put up my contact. I'd love to answer any other further questions they might have.
Awesome.
So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. This was fantastic. It's very rare to get your smarts education level and be a nutcracker boy. So I'm so happy to have you on. Everyone, I will tag Brenan's information in the show notes so that if you'd like to look at where he's at, he is here local in Southern California. If you're interested in working with him or reaching out to him, he can direct you where he feels like he could best serve you. So thank you so much, Brenan, for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ali. I appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. This is obviously an episode that is near and dear to my heart, as this is what I have chosen to do with my life and my dance community. It's very exciting to me to know that you guys are getting a little peek into a world that may be new, foreign, or something that you could fine tune as you're working outside of the studio. Now, if you have any questions, you can always reach me at info@alignfitnessbyali.com. Now, in light of today's episode, as you might be having questions and where do I go next? How do I know what to do? I want to remind you that if you're not local to Huntington Beach, which is actually where both Brenan and I are, I do virtual calls. So this means that we hop on Skype or Zoom, you wherever you're at in the world, me here in Huntington Beach, and we work for about 30 minutes at a time to either improve your technical side of dance. So that could mean extensions, jumping, turnout, flexibility, Or we get to approach the other side by me looking at what I think your body needs and me giving you exercises to work on and start adding into your routine to increase your balance, flexibility, jumps, whatever that is. And most of the time that looks like certain exercises for core strength, hip stability, better posture, stronger joint support. These are all things that we can do virtually, and by having a little dancer eye behind you, it's a nice way to get a little taste of what I'm doing here instead of having to fly to me. And lastly, sharing one of my favorite things. During the holidays, my mom always makes these dehydrated pecans that taste like the ones you get in the mall that have like the sugar on them, but she uses dates and cinnamon and cloves and some like honey, I think. And she makes this mixture and then she puts all the nuts in it and then she dehydrates them and they taste like those candied nuts. So this is the time of year that I anticipate and expect that my mom is going to make those for me and send them in the mail. And it reminds me that one of the best things that I did was I would take my almonds, soak them, and then I would dehydrate them with different spices and herbs on them. So it was a nice way to take a plain nut, something that I eat all the time and can honestly get tired of. And I love to do rosemary or honey, or I've done like cayenne and honey on it. So it has like a spicy but sweet thing. So it's a nice addition into your trail mix. And it also is a fun holiday thing. So there's lots of recipes online to do your own trail mixes or things that you can just throw in the oven and you get to choose how much sweetness or spicy you put on them. And I love it. I think it's fantastic. I love that individual personality of your nuts and your trail mixes. Something you can give away, but more importantly to me, it's a yummy holiday treat and it's really easy and something that I just keep a stash of in my house ready to go almost at all times. So thank you so much for being here today, week after week. It warms my heart and I love getting the emails and comments both in direct message and on iTunes, letting me know what you guys love. Thank you so much for sharing those things with me and other fellow dancers. So I will see you all next week here on Wednesday on Beyond the Point.